People who change the world, people who build momentum in their lives and in their careers, very rarely are they ever ready to do what they did. The three friends from design school were not ready to start Airbnb. Two bagel shop entrepreneurs weren't ready to become Ben & Jerry's. A 15-year-old from Stockholm, Sweden wasn't ready to build an environmental movement, but today Greta Thunberg has been nominated for 3 Nobel Prizes for her work for the environment. And she wasn't ready, she was a teenager. And there were setbacks and there were failures and there were mistakes along the way, but it all led back to this game of now. And in the game of now, you don't wait for courage in order to take action. You take action, and then you let courage catch up along the way. You don't wait for courage in order to take action, you take action, and you let courage catch up along the way. And one of my favorite game of now stories is the story of this woman, Damayanti Hingorani. And Damayanti Hingorani, she was written up in Time magazine as a trailblazer and a pioneer. And what makes her story really remarkable is that she was born and raised in a refugee camp. No running water, no electricity, but she did something really remarkable. She taught herself how to read. And the first book that she read from cover to cover was a story about Ford Motor Company. And after reading this book, she decides that somehow, some way, she wants to move to America and she wants to become an engineer with Ford. And her entire village got behind the dream. They saved every penny, every rupee they had so that she was able to get on a boat to the United States. She was lucky enough to get a scholarship to Oklahoma State University. The day after she graduates, she makes her way to Detroit, Michigan, where she applies for her dream job. She even finds her way into a room with a hiring manager. But this hiring manager looks at her resume and he looks at her application and he says, "Wait a second, are you applying for the job of an engineer?" And she says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, look, I'm sorry, we actually don't have any female engineers working here right now." You see, this was the 1960s, and Ford Motor Company had thousands of engineers on staff, but not a single one of them was a woman. And so Damayanti Hingorani can literally feel the dreams slipping out of her hands, everything that she's worked for. Deflated, she picks up her purse, she picks up her resume, and she begins to walk out of the room. But before she turns the door handle, she decides at that moment that she is going to play the game of now. Not the game of someday, but the game of now. She's not going to wait for courage in order to take action. She's going to take action, and then she's going to let courage catch up along the way. So she turns around and she looks at this hiring manager and she tells him her story of all the sacrifice that it took for her to get to this country, to get to this city, to get to this very room. And then she flips him from an outsider to an insider. She says, "Look, if you don't have any females on staff right now, let's change that. Let's do it together. Let's go find really good people. Let's bring them in." And this hiring manager in this meeting feels so inspired that he goes out and he fights with his colleagues. He fights with his bosses. And in 1967, Damayanti Hingorani becomes Ford Motor Company's very first female engineer. The story kind of gets better from there. So she's driving her car around in Detroit, Michigan, and her car breaks down, ironically. So she walks to a local phone booth, because there were phone booths back then. She opens up a phone book, and she's a newcomer to the country, so she doesn't know anybody. So she looks up the most common Indian name that she can think of. The guy who answers the phone helps her fix her car. That man was her future husband and my father. They were married right outside of Detroit in a classic Indian wedding, and they had 2 sons, my brother Sanjay and me. I look at least 5 years younger in this photo. What they taught us more than anything was to play the game of now. Don't wait for courage in order to take action. Take action and let courage catch up along the way.